Eggs have been promoted as one of nature's best foods, and the egg industry has developed a wide assortment of materials to publicize this notion. But a growing bed of evidence indicates that there are problems associated with eating eggs. And a look inside the egg production system shows clearly that modern egg production is not what nature intended. In our mind's eye, chickens are part of the traditional barnyard, scratching and pecking in the dirt. We have long recognized the strong maternal instincts of chickens, hence the term mother hen. The birds act nobly and selflessly to care for their young. But the hen is not with her chicks anymore. In fact, the hen isn't even in the barnyard. Today, she is crowded into a small wire cage in a huge factory warehouse. Practically all commercial egg-laying hens in the U.S. live packed in battery cages, which are lined up in rows. Each hen is given half a square foot of space where she will be confined for more than a year, sometimes several years. Every normal chicken behavior, including dust bathing, nest building, preening, even walking, is thwarted by the cages. In fact, the birds are packed so tightly that they cannot even stretch their wings. Denied their most basic instincts, battery cage hens become physically and emotionally frustrated and depressed. Constantly rubbing against the wire cages, the hens' feathers are worn off, and their skin becomes bruised and abrased. Hens rescued from battery cages have been examined by veterinarians and found to have bruising over more than 50% of their bodies. Battery cages also cause injuries when the birds become trapped by their heads, wings, and feet. Meanwhile, the uncomfortable wire flooring, which is slanted to allow eggs to roll into a collection tray, contributes to foot deformities. Egg factory managers regard laying hens merely as production units, not living, feeling animals. It is this callous attitude which allows sentient beings to be commodified, and their suffering and death to be considered acceptable economic losses on the agribusiness balance sheet. The egg industry is well aware that crowding hens in battery cages causes animal suffering, increases the number of deaths, and even results in fewer eggs produced per bird. But overcrowding is the industry norm because it is profitable. Colorado State University professor of physiology and biophysics, Dr. Bernard Rollin, explains in his book Farm Animal Welfare. It has long been known that the stocking of fewer birds per cage leads to greater production per bird. It is nonetheless more economically efficient to put a greater number of birds into each cage, accepting lower productivity per bird but greater productivity per cage. In other words, though each hen is less productive when crowded, the operation as a whole makes more money with a high stocking density. Chickens are cheap, cages are expensive. Cramped and crowded into battery cages, modern egg-laying hens become agitated and driven to excessive pecking. In order to reduce the resulting injuries, the hens are debeaked. That is, a portion of the bird's beak is cut off. This involves cutting through bone, nerve, and soft tissue with a hot blade and causes both acute and chronic pain. In some cases, the pain is so severe that the birds stop eating, and this results in deaths from what the industry calls starve-outs. Before the advent of intensive factory farming, laying hens produced 70 eggs per year. Today's hens have been genetically altered and primed for maximum egg production, and each is expected to produce more than 250 eggs per year. The birds' bodies are taxed beyond their biological capabilities, and many die. Commercial laying hens typically suffer from insufficient calcium in their bones because producing shells for over 250 eggs each year requires an exorbitant amount of calcium, more than they can assimilate from their diet. An industry newspaper reports, a hen will use a quantity of calcium for yearly egg production that is greater than her entire skeleton by 30-fold or more. After a year in production, the hen's egg production rates drop off, and they are considered spent. At this time, many are force-molted. Force-molting is a process which artificially shocks the hen's systems into another egg-laying cycle. It is done by subjecting the birds to extended periods of darkness, withdrawing water for days, and denying food for weeks. Forced molting causes the birds to lose as much as 25% of their body weight. When hens are no longer deemed useful for egg production, they are pulled from the cages and thrown into trucks bound for the slaughterhouse. The birds' brittle, calcium-depleted bones are ill-equipped to withstand this harsh handling, and they often break. Spent hens typically end up in animal food or processed meat products like pot pies or soup, where their battered bodies can be ground up or shredded, and the blemishes unnoticed. In recent years, the number of chickens raised for meat has skyrocketed, and with an abundance of meat-type chickens available, slaughterhouses don't want spent hens. One company has developed a system to remove spent hens from the cages, throw them into grinders alive, and process them on-site into animal feed. Tragically, the fate of spent hens is similar to that of unwanted male chicks at the hatchery. Male chicks born of egg-laying breeds are of no economic use. They don't grow fast enough to be raised profitably for meat, and they will never lay eggs. So they are discarded by the easiest and most economical means. In some cases, the chicks are literally thrown into trash cans. They suffocate as others are piled on top, or they die of starvation or exposure to the elements. In other cases, unwanted male chicks are crushed or ground up alive, or even dumped onto fields as fertilizer. Whether consumers buy battery cage or free-range eggs, unwanted male chicks suffer and die at the hatchery. Chickens, like all other animals, are sentient, feeling animals. As Dr. Bernard Rollin wrote, chickens are not mindless, simple automata, but are complex behaviorally, do quite well in learning, show a rich social organization, and have a diverse repertoire of calls. Anyone who has kept barnyard chickens also recognizes their significant differences in personality. When hens are rescued from battery cages and allowed to roam freely in a natural environment, they immediately begin to scratch in the dirt and stretch their wings. Instincts which have been thwarted by their prolonged confinement return. The hens explore their environment, build nests, and dust bathe. And they form a social structure, developing positive social bonds. In her book, Development of Brain and Behavior in the Chicken, poultry scientist Leslie Rogers wrote, "With the increased knowledge of the behavior and cognitive abilities of the chicken has come the realization that the chicken is not an inferior species to be treated merely as a food source." But tragically, agribusiness continues to see chickens merely as a food source and individual birds as production units. In the U.S. alone, approximately 250 million egg-laying hens are enslaved in small wire cages. Their abuse is among the worst of any animal in the modern world. While European nations have passed laws banning battery cages, the U.S. has lagged far behind. It is time that these birds be protected from intolerable abuse in America too. What you can do. Boycott battery cage eggs. Don't buy eggs produced by hens in battery cages. This comprises practically all commercial eggs produced in the U.S. today. Beware of free-range eggs. While eggs labeled as free-range may give laying hens more space to move, there is no uniform standard of care. In addition, free-range hens are typically slaughtered when they are no longer productive. Don't eat eggs. The best way to prevent the abuse of hens and chicks is to refrain from eating eggs altogether. In many recipes, eggs can simply be left out. In other recipes, egg substitutes are easy to find. Educate friends. Inform friends, relatives, and others about the abuses associated with egg production and urge them to consider an egg-free lifestyle. Change the law. Contact state and federal representatives and senators and urge them to support legislation to outlaw battery cages in the U.S. For more information and egg-free recipes, contact Farm Sanctuary, P.O. Box 150, Watkins Glen, New York, 14891.